I want to welcome everybody. I'm Stu Dalton. I'm a Master Gardener with the UC Cooperative Extension in the San Mateo, San Francisco district. I'm also an American Rose Society Consulting Rosarian. That just means you're supposed to know quite a bit about roses before you can become one of those. You have to have some training. And I'm also past president of the Peninsula Rose Society. When we meet, right now we're on Zoom, but normally we would meet at the Veterans Memorial Senior Center in Redwood City, where the Master Gardeners also have some offices that we aren't in right now. So Zoom has changed quite a few things. Now I'm seeing, not myself, so can I get on speaker view somehow?
You're on speaker view for mine.
Oh, you are? Okay, I'm just seeing you, and that's why I was wondering. I don't know who's on other than myself, but that's fine. What I'm going to do is ask that people stay on mute until we get to the question and answers. And the first question and answers will be on chat. So if you have a question, go on to the chat and you can see that. Now I'm hopeful that I can do this smoothly. I'm going to share my screen. And there. I want to make sure you can see that. Can people see that? Mm-hmm. Great. Again, normally I'd be doing this in front of an audience, either outside in front of a pruning desk or inside. This is at the Veterans Memorial Senior Center actually a few years ago in that picture. And so normally I'd be dressed a little different and we'd be doing this about this time of year or maybe in January. I'm going to talk about dormant rose pruning and care. Actually, that's a slight misnomer. Could be winter rose pruning, because in our climate, you don't get fully dormant roses, but you get a big slowdown. And so the best time to prune, to really rejuvenate the rose and get good blooms for the next year, reduce the disease, et cetera, is during the dormant season. And I'm looking forward to giving you some more information on that. This year, via Zoom, I get to do it a little differently. Normally I'd be up there illustrating things and pruning material and showing you how to do it. Here, I've got some embedded videos in this. So I'll show some of that during this. And afterwards, I understand we're going to be able to distribute some of the information. If you do have a chat question, make sure you include your email with that chat question so that we can send things out if you have a question that we don't get to, or if you want to receive some of the information like PowerPoint slides, you can find out where to do that. Afterwards, I'll be happy to answer questions. Let me move this to the next one. The learning objectives for today are how to and when to prune dormant roses. I'm going to talk about tools and garden safety since roses have thorns. I want to tell you how to prune, the kinds of cuts, and how to prune different rose types. I'll talk about planting and organic amendments, dormant spray, which these days for me and many other people is either optional or organic if you're going to do a spray at all. And I'm going to talk about water management for roses. Right now, you should be getting ready. If you are planning, you might want to plan for a dry time. And we've had more of that than we really want right now. But typically, January 1st to 15th is when the roses are about as dormant as they get. The blooms tend to slow down or stop. They tend to stop growing or growing very much. And you want to prune out all the dead, diseased, or damaged, and any crossing or weak canes and suckers. I'll talk about all of those but that's for everything. If it's dead, get it out of there. But you want to prune the things that are once blooming roses after they bloom. I'll talk about that some more as well. You want to shape the plant. By the way, I don't see an image of me, and normally I try and illustrate things in the side little area. I don't know if that's possible. All I see is a compass on there. But sometimes I use my hands to illustrate things while I'm showing the slide. That doesn't work, no problem. The next thing you do is you shape the plant. If it's not doing what you want, you have to tell it what to do. And you prune the large plants, leaving pencil-sized or pinky-sized canes. If it's growing too aggressively, you can prune it more aggressively. You can prune it back. If it's too small, prune it very lightly. It's also a good time to plant, repot, or replace roses in the Bay Area. I'm going to show a video on some of this, so I'll go over it very briefly. But again, you want to be safe, protect your hands, head, arms, and eyes. You want to sharpen the tools. You want, because like in a kitchen, old adage is a sharp knife is actually safer. It won't slip as much and cut you. So the same thing applies here. A sharp pruning tool is much better both for you on your hands. It's not as hard on your hands as you do a lot of pruning, and it's easier on the rose as well. If you do get scratched, you want to clean it, wash up, and use some liquid antiseptic that'll get into any puncture wounds. Use a bypass pruners. One bypasses the other, and I'll show those, but these are all examples of bypass pruners. You also have other tools like sharpeners there shown in a pruning saw. Well, I'll show those in the video shortly. Next, I'll have this short video on tools and safety, and then I'll go into showing how to use some of the large tools to do some fast work. If you look at right in back of me there, I'm going to show next how to prune that large rose. It's about a 30-year-old Sally Holmes rose that's in back. Hi, I'm Stuart Dalton. I'm with the Peninsula Rose Society. I'm a consulting Rosarian with the American Rose Society, and I'm a UCCE Master Gardener with the San Mateo, San Francisco district. I'm going to give you a rose pruning discussion aimed at the dormant season pruning. Normally in our area, the Peninsula and San Francisco, that would be around the first part of January through the middle of February. I'm doing this a little early because I wanted to get this on film, but and it's a nice day today, not rainy or whatever. What I'm going to show first is safety issues. Right now, you can see I've got a long sleeve shirt, a little less likely to get stuck by a thorn, heavy pants, a hat, and what I'm going to show you now is a couple of different types of gloves. The common theme they all have is these are long gauntlet gloves to protect the upper arm. I'm going to put on some gauntlets that if you don't have these gauntlet gloves, you can use these with regular gloves. These also protect the upper arm, so I can reach into a rose and not be hurt. So I'll put those on, put on a pair of gloves. These are gauntlet gloves. These particular ones and these have goat skin in the palm, and that's because it's thorn penetrating resistant. So the other thing you want to do, just like in the kitchen with, you want to have a nice sharp knife so it causes less injury. You want to have nice sharp shears. These are bypass shears. I'm going to hold these towards the camera and show you these. One bypasses the other. And they're like scissors. These are called an anvil shear. You can sort of see the flat bottom and a sharp top. These are good for things that you want to crush. Some kinds of stems you actually crush for a cut flower. These make a nice clean cut, and they're sharp. You want to make sure they're sharp, and these happen to be a Felco number 7, which has an ergonomic handle, but all of these are good shears. You take the blade, hold the sharp blade, and then pull a carbide sharpener about 4 or 5 times along it, and that makes it very sharp. It'll cut paper. For slightly larger things that need to be cut, this is a number 20 Felco. It's also a bypass shears. This is a very strong mechanical advantage shear that also extends out to get very high mechanical advantage, and will cut through very, very thick 1.5 inch canes or branches, if you will. This is a very useful tool to get on big things. To get way up on the top of some very large climbers, you can use these type of remote shears. And then finally, what I'm going to show first in this is to, somewhere, I don't have my goggles right now, but I would normally be wearing my goggles as well. What I'm going to show first, and I'll take a quick break before I do it, is one of the things I use because I have 250 roses. I need to cut them in a hurry because I need to fill up a couple of different weeks worth of green bins with the material. And I don't want to compost the rose material because it may have a disease that overwinters. But this is a great thing to help us do a lot of pruning in a hurry. I'll show that in just a minute. Next, I'm going to show the next step, which is the taking a lot of the top material off. Actually, I've done this now quite a bit on these large shrubs. This particular one that I'm going to be cutting, again, there are 3 of them in a row, and they're about 30 years old. And what I found out recently is some rose growers like David Austin, very good grower, mainly of shrub and large roses, they use hedge trimmers exclusively. And frankly, they do a pretty good job. But in this case, I'm just taking off some of the material to shape it and be able to see what's going on. I'll talk about that in this. Okay, this is a Sally Holmes rose that I'm going to prune with the hedge trimmer. I have to take off the bulk off the top so that I can put it in the green bin, and so I might take it down a third. I may take it further than that later, but I can do that with the other kinds of shears later on. The nice thing about this is quick. Now that's a lot quicker than I could do with the hand shears. I'm going to go over here on the other side now, and I'm going to take off a little more. Sorry. I will skip that to try and save a little time, but basically I took off the other side of that same rose. One of the things you're doing by this type of pruning is you're making it easier on you and the rose. The electric shears that I was just using are pretty powerful. They'll cut through quite a bit. But the other things that you can use to cut through very large and old material are things like a large pruning saw, which can cut through very old wood. This happens to be something I took off of one of those Sally Holmes rows. Just one large piece of material here, as you can see, took off quite a bit of material all at once and rejuvenates the rose. I use loppers on the very large canes and go on down to the shears for the smaller. You want to cut cleanly, use the mechanical advantage to make your work easier, your hands and arms easier, and taking out the oldest growth periodically rejuvenates a rose. The oldest one in the world that's known through documents is between 700 and 1,000 years old in Hildesheim, Germany. You can see a picture of it here. It actually grew back from its roots after it was bombed out in World War II. Roses can be tough, and that's a good example. Here's an example. Remember, I showed that picture with the saws and the shears, and this is what I cut off. I cut the bottom here with a saw, and I'm going to show you how that worked. This is where I cut it out. These are all new growths, and I can train these, and they'll grow up big in the next year. This is 1 year old now over here, and this will take over the dominant growth. But you can see here, for instance, I cut that off last year. All these are new growth. There you go. This is, how do you cut it back? There's a bit of discussion, controversy, whatever, about does it really matter if you use a hedge trimmer or do it the way I'm about to teach? And the answer is, it matters a little bit. You'll get, if you just cut randomly, you'll get some issues. For instance, you want to show the rose exactly how to grow, and you can do that by where you cut it. I'm going to illustrate that in a couple minutes, but one thing you can do is if you cut it really high above what's called a bud, there's a bud that shows up as sort of a, pardon the expression, a nose and a smile. And I'll show you that again in the video. But if you cut it too high, what happens is it dies back. Why? Because the growth wants to go out through the bud. And this is all doing nothing up here. So it dies back. This is an illustration. You want to point the buds away from the center. Well, you can't change where the bud is. So what you do is you cut above one that points away from the center to keep it from getting crowded. That helps in air and light getting in the middle, gives you better blooms, and reduces diseases. You want to use the sharp shears, as we talked about. It's great if you can keep the sharp blade on the side that you keep. In other words, if you cut it right here, you want to have the sharp side down here. It's the way that we teach it is a 45-degree angle. Frankly, it doesn't have to be 45 degrees. Just what you're trying to do is have the bud here and enough material above it so that it doesn't dry out immediately. You think about this, if you cut it too close over here, then the material there's very little of it between the bud. I clicked it down, sorry. Problems when you're using a touchpad. When the bud dries out because the water evaporates through this cut. If you cut it too high, you get dieback. If you cut it too low, the bud dries and dies. I'm going to show you the proper cut now in the video. Would be a good example of something that's not pruned for the final cut. You can see above every leaf here and under every leaf, here, 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 there are buds, dormant buds. When I pull off the leaf, there's another bud right underneath, right here. What I'm going to be doing is cutting above that, about a 1/4 inch, with the sharp shears, like that. The bottom should be close to the bud. The bud will be pointing in the direction that new growth will happen in the spring. And so what I'm trying to do is shape the rose and make it grow outward so that it's not closed in the middle with crossing canes and lack of air circulation and light. What that does is it keeps you from getting good fungus control and insect control. Air and light helps on disease control. So how do you prune the different types of roses? For most of the roses in most gardens, what I'm about to show is the large roses, mini roses, and again, you remove the dead disease crossing or very weak canes. Here I illustrate crossing in the middle. And let's pretend that's weak. If it was a strong cane, I'd probably keep it because it's coming out of this larger bulb. Usually I illustrate this with my hand, but it's sort of like a fist. And it's the bud union where things have been grafted on. Things that grow out of the bud union, they're good. Things that grow from below it are suckers. And I'll talk about those later. You want to clear out the center, leave an open vase shape. And again, I use my open hand normally to illustrate this. And if you just take your open hand and point it upward, that's sort of what you want when you're done. A handful, 3 to 5 fingers or canes on most modern roses is just fine. You want to remove the oldest canes periodically, and then with floribundas, abundant, leaves more branching structure and do the pruning lightly. Light pruning might be 1/3 reduction in height. Heavy pruning might be 1/2 to 2/3. The next couple I'm going to show, and I may reduce the one in the middle a little bit, but this is a 3-part series to talk about pruning shrubs. And first I'll talk about reducing the height. Hi, this is a bush or shrub, and I'm going to cut out a lot of it because this is really tall. It also had a lot of alfalfa pellets, and that sometimes really causes very long growth. This is getting close to 8 feet tall from the pot. It's been in this pot for quite a few years. It'll have to be repotted probably every 5th year or so. First thing I'm going to do is cut off a lot of the height. You don't need it to be this tall. I don't want it to be this tall. So just give it a haircut so you can see what you're doing. This is not the pruning so much as it is getting rid of the extraneous growth so you can see what you're doing. And if there's anything that's really just in the inside and spindly growth or things like that, I can get rid of that as well. There are too many breaks from the bud union, actually. So I'm going to cut out at least one of them right off the inside. And right off the bat, you can see what this does is sort of open up the middle. Next, I'm going to talk about what pieces to keep and how to start really pruning it. Then I'll show you the finish. So I'm going to take a little bit off of this side. So again, I can see what I'm doing and see what needs to be taken down further. Eventually, you want to strip off as much of this as you can so you can see what's going on inside. Strip the leaves. Stripping off a few leaves, pulling down on the leaves. And I see this one. This, it's down here, it's a good size. It's a reasonable size. But I've got several of these in here. And I'm going to say I want to keep a few of them. So I will cut off some of the side growth and make a decision here. Which ones of these I want to keep, which I want to get rid of. This one's probably the least robust. New, but it's not very robust. Down at the bottom here, have some very small growth. Out. And I hope you can see this in here. There are quite a few of these main stems. You really need about a handful of them. 4 or 5 or 6 is about the maximum you need. And I've got several more than that. So I'm going to take out this all the way down at the base. And I'm going to do some more pruning, and I'll be back in just. And we step ahead a little bit here. All I've really done is strip off the leaves and clean it up, but I haven't finished pruning yet. So I want to go in the next. Okay, this shows you some of the litter that is comes with pruning. Leaves, dead leaves, etc. There is mulch on here, and I'm not going to take that out. But I am going to take out all the leaves that are have fallen, because if you find a leaf that has a set of orange spots underneath, that's a type of fungal disease called rust. Looks rusty. That's why they call it that. And if that leaf is down on the ground, even when it rains or anything else, the spores are right on the ground, and they'll reproduce and come back the next year. So you want to clean up all the leaf litter. And here I've got a stem with dieback. It's dead from here all the way down to here. And so I'm going to take the whole thing out. I don't need this many main canes. This is brand new. This is brand new. Both of those are nice, strong canes. This one's strong, this one's strong, this one's strong. So I've got plenty of the canes, or branches, if you will. I'm going to take off some of the obvious things because I don't need them. And I don't need this one right here. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 named. Now, this one's sort of crossing. This one is not the strongest one. So I have to figure out which one I want to keep. I think I'll keep the one that is not the strongest, or rather get rid of it. And then prune this back and separate the canes. So let's see. There is a bud. Here is something I can use as a prop. Across, put it on a thorn, and that'll keep it. I'll talk about that in a minute. Out, away from the other. Then I will cut these back reasonable length. This one's going that way, this one's going that way. I'm going to jump ahead here to save a minute here and talk about props. Not everybody uses these, not everybody knows about them, but in effect, it's like a bonsai. You're telling the plant how to shape itself. You're opening it up in the middle, and you're using these Y-shaped props that you cut from waste material. If they're too close, they're crowded, they're in the middle there, you can use the props to open up the structure. I've had them still there the next year when I come around to prune. They, and the plant doesn't need them anymore. It's growing in that shape. You can use waste material. That's what I always do. You can cut the bottom flat and stick it on a thorn, and then you spread it out to prop. Yeah, this is exaggerated, obviously. The thorns aren't that big. Tree roses, or standards. Most people call them tree roses. They're actually 4 pieces of material. The roots are one type of rose, usually a Dr. Huey, very vigorous rootstock. Then there's a strong trunk. And then there are actually 2 pieces at the top that are budded on, one on each side. Sometimes even in a Home Depot, you can find 2 different roses on the top. That's a little more rare. But there are 4 pieces put together. You want to keep the things that are flowering with the flowers you want, and those are on the top. You want to make those open and airy. Think of a pair of antlers with space in the middle. That's what you want when it's done. I'm going to show a short video on that. This is after, obviously, I've taken everything off and cut it down. I'm just cleaning it up at the end, but you get the idea. Okay, now I'm going to clean up the bud union here a little bit. You can see there's old bark. There are a few stubs from prior pruning that I should have taken off last year, but I didn't. I'm cleaning it up. You can actually use a wire brush on these, and you might get additional what are called basal breaks, meaning from the bud union or the base here, you get new growth out of this area. Allowing it to get more sunlight on it helps. having things like growth promoters like alfalfa, which has a natural growth stimulant called tricontinol. And that is something that can actually help on basal bricks. But you can see it's now maybe a little lopsided, but about 12 inches, maybe a little up to 18 inches off to the side. Some of the old growth removed, and it's more or less symmetrical. That's what you want when you're done with a rose that is going to be a standard tree rose. Thank you. Okay, how do you do climbers? Many people have seen climbers. One at Filoli, for instance, is the most photographed rose. It's 2 Sally Holmes roses that are climbing up over an arbor. People sit under that and have their picture taken. I have about 15 of those in my yard, and some of them are climbers and some are not. You can, again, remove dead, disease, damage, crossing, or very weak growth, but they're different. The first couple of years, at least, you need to not prune so much. You need to create the structure. If you think about an arbor, they're not going to be up there the first year. You let the long limber canes go up over the top and down. Why down? Because there's something called apial growth, meaning it goes up by the rose hormones, and they respond to gravity. So you put them up over the top and down, you'll get bloom over the whole thing. I'll show that in a minute. For trellises and arches, that's what you do. You can do 2 types of pruning on those limber canes. You can prune flush to the horizontal canes, or leave 2 or 3 or even more bud eyes, and that will cause a little taller growth coming off. So you got a split rail fence, you put one down below and let a side cane come up, and you can prune that and attach it to the upper part of the fence. This shows that in a very short video. Whoop, sorry. This is a set of 2 climbing roses. These happen to be New Dawn. They're fairly old. They've been in these large pots in these locations for over 15 years. They go up and over an arch. And the idea is, from ones that are on this side, you want it to go up, over, and down. And you just prune away a lot of the material that is extra, but keep the nice limber canes going up, over, and down. You want the ends to go down, and that keeps growth coming up all along, and it'll bloom all along this whole area. The last, one of the later things I want to cover here is suckers. These are photos up here with blooms that I took in San Jose Rose Garden. Everybody has suckers if they have budded roses, and most roses that you buy are budded. What's that mean? It means there's a rootstock and a different rose. Here in San Jose, the original rose they wanted and the one that they listed is this pink rose over to the right side here. The red, dark red roses, which are dominant here, are a sucker, probably. The one that's very common in our area because it's used as rootstock in California and Texas, where most roses are grown that we get. And those are a Dr. Huey rose. They compete for energy from the roots. I've seen it where there was a row of white roses and all of a sudden a red rose came up. This wasn't the queen painting the roses red, this was the sucker coming up. And they couldn't figure out why. And I said, took one look and I said, that's not a rose, that's a sucker. There's growth from the rootstock below the bud union, and that's the knob that I talked about before. You want to remove these suckers completely, as much as you can. Cut them all the way back if you can. This is a climbing rose here. That's a stake. This is a sucker, and that's a sucker coming off of the very bottom roots. Here's a conventional rose in a pot. And there's a sucker off to the side, and here it's removed. When you get the plants and get the amendments, this is the time to buy the plants, by the way. Some of the mail order houses are running out some of the plants. Want to buy plants that fit. Want to think of the ones that are smaller in front. Minis, floribundas typically are smaller. You want to space the area between the plants to be the width of the plant at maturity, and you can usually find that information online for any plant. When you put the large plants or the climbers in back, maybe up against a fence, you want to try and get 5 hours of sunlight if you can. There are some roses that'll do okay in less sunlight, but I know I have a lot of shade in my yard because of some big redwoods that are in the wrong place that I can't move. I've been able to do pretty well just by being very selective on what roses I use there. You want to amend the soil. I've got some photos from the Lingso Garden Materials place that has some organics. These are all organics. And they're a variety of things. You want to test your soil if you can. You want the best to pH, meaning the acidity or alkalinity. You want it clear, just barely acidic. You want it 6 to 6.5, that's perfect. But you don't want to try and get it too alkaline, or the plants can't absorb the nutrients that are in the soil. You can modify that slightly by adding certain things. Cottonseed meal, for instance, is slightly acidic. You can use other things to acidify soil, but usually adding a good soil with compost mix, a third well-rotted compost, will help quite a bit in both adding nutrients and providing the kind of soil that you need for best growth. Organic fertilizers take temperature and bacterial action to break down, and they break down slowly. They don't tend to burn, and they have a lot of micronutrients that are natural in them. There are things like bone meal, which have the middle ingredient here, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, but they have basically no potassium. There's blood meal, that has a lot of nitrogen, bat guano, which is mixed, many other things that are available. I use a lot of fish fertilizer, which is the liquid, and kelp, and alfalfa. Alfalfa is one of the cheaper nutrients you can get. You can get about a 50-pound bag for about $25 in a feed store. You want to get the kind that doesn't have molasses, only because it will mold. That's the kind that's used for cattle and for rabbits and such. To plan to replace, every now and then you want to look at your yard. If you have poor performers, you want to give them 2 years, sort of make sure they get established. But then if they aren't performing, or they're getting really weak with time or whatever, or really they got disease and are just ready to take out, shovel them, shovel pruning. You can order bare plants early for a good selection. I noticed some of the ones like Reagan in the East Bay that I've used before have run out of a couple of the newer and more popular roses. You get the needed amendments after testing your soil pH, and you want that middle ground that I was talking about for roses. And then when things start to bud out and the buds start to swell, and then they grow to maybe a half an inch or an inch, but they're growing in the wrong place. They're growing toward the middle. Weeks after you prune, say in February or early March, you'll see these growth toward the middle. At that point, put on a glove with a gauntlet and you can just push down, and they're very tender. You don't want to do it when you might knock off something you do want, but this will be an easy way to clear out the middle, and that clear middle helps a lot, and I'll talk about that for diseases. I mentioned before, you prune once bloomers after they bloom. The spring flowers come out on 1 or 2 year old wood. So if you prune them too heavily early, you'll get a few blooms, but not too many because you've pruned out the blooms. For diseases, these are 2 examples. One looks early in the season like these rusty spots. Later, it turns these little spots on the under turn black. And early in the season, you often, when it's wet, you often find these black spots. These are 2 examples. They're really common. To manage that, use a combination of organic materials. If you don't wish to spray for fungal disease, you prune for more air and light and increase the ground to foliage height. You clean up debris. If you use sprays, use less toxic sprays. They're listed if they're organic and can be used basically on anything up to and including food, according to the USDA. These are examples of organic sprays. They're less toxic. Follow the directions, spray early in the day. When it's not too hot, spray the underside of leaves as well as the tops. When it gets to be dry again, in maybe March or April, you set the timers to water deeply and infrequently because it's important to get the water down deep for the roots. They've done tests at UC Davis, and it turns out that if you do it infrequently and deeply, you can get by even in the summer with very little water. There's been some trials up there that are very interesting on that regard. And that gets to the end. There's this information that will be available on the PDF if you're interested. Remember to put your name in the chat with your email. And if you want to ask questions of a master gardener on any gardening question for the residents, you can get hold of us on the helpline or email that's shown here. And then, whoop, let me do that. You want to, I want to acknowledge the UC Master Gardeners in help on this. Thank you, Suzanne. And I want to also say that these are my photographs and videos. So if you have any questions on them or on the presentation, you can ask me. For more information in detail on roses, the Peninsula Rose Society, you can go on to peninsulaRoseSociety.org. There's also information there under resources that includes quite a bit of information on favorite roses and more detailed diagrams on pruning, et cetera. There's also a virtual rose show if you want to look at what the roses look like in May. References, again, you don't have to click on these, but they're available. And with that, I'll take questions. I'm going to stop my share at this point and take questions. And I guess Suzanne may have found some things on chat, but we'll take those first.
One of the things asked is, what's the time period when you can buy bare root roses? And the second part of that is, what to look for in a bare root rose?
The time is now to buy, but you won't see them shipped until later. The growing fields typically are in Southern California and Texas. They get them when they're about as dormant as they can be, and they tend to ship, depends on the grower, from about January to March, and they are shipped when it should be time to plant in your area. When you find them in a nursery, it's a little harder to do that these days. You look for nice thick canes, the size of your finger at least, and a number of strong canes. You want #1 plants. That's a grading system that's used on roses. Any other questions?
I live in Central Florida. Do you have any suggestions for like fragrant, hardy rose that I could plant here?
Well, you want something that's resistant to black spot, because Central Florida, you get a bit of humid, warm weather in the summertime, and black spot and resistance to fungal disease is probably important to you. A lot of the David Austin roses are specifically bred for disease resistance. There's a lot of them that are very fragrant. One of my favorite yellow roses, somebody was talking about yellow roses, is the Poet's Wife. It's a relatively recent one. It's relatively small compared to some of the huge climbers. And it smells lemony. Lemon yellow, lemon. There are many, many other roses. Gertrude Jenkel is an older David Austin, pretty disease resistant. I think you would probably be okay for Sally Holmes rose, not if you were in Nebraska, but in Florida, it's a disease resistant, larger shrub. It's a single, like just in back of me, and it will probably do great in Florida. It's not fragrant though. That's the one thing about it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? There were a few questions that came up on an earlier call I can refer to if you don't have any more, Susan.
Well, you
I-
mentioned you have shade
Yeah.
of redwood trees, and that's common in our area. So how, you said 5 hours of
Yeah,
sun?
that's a guideline. And there are quite a few roses that do okay in lesser shade. They always do better in 5 or more hours. But I have got that a lot. I just put in solar and I guarantee you I get a lot of shade even on the solar. But there is a whole class, for instance, that I have quite a few of called hybrid musk roses. Hybrid musk roses were developed in the foggy old England in the 20s and 30s. Sally Holmes' parent, one of them is actually a hybrid musk, a little tiny one, but it's called ballerina. And because of the hybrid musk and its genetics, it does okay in moderate shade. There are quite a few of the hybrid musks that do pretty well with moderate shade. There are also, if you go online and look up a specific rose or look for shade tolerant roses at, for instance, heirloom full garden roses, they're a good example where they list the ones that are good for shade. And when I say good, again, they get a little leggy, they bloom a little less, but they're pretty reliable. I have some in maybe 1 or 2 hours of good sun in the maybe 1 hour in the winter, and maybe 3 or 4 hours in the summer, and they do okay.
Great.
Other questions?
I have a question. Are those little tiny mini roses you buy in a pot for the house, can they be treated the same way? Are they roses?
Yes, they're roses. Typically, they're not listed, or they're listed as like parade roses, or usually you don't have a tag on them. I've tried, if you look at the ones you get at a Trader Joe's, for instance, and you look carefully, they're actually 4 in one pot, and they're just forced to bloom in 5 to 6 months after the cuttings are started. All minis are on their own roots. You don't have to worry about suckers. You can theoretically, I've done this, split up those 4 plants into separate ones, pot them up into a bigger pot, and maybe they'll survive and maybe they'll bloom nicely. But you can also buy them from specialty houses as individual plants, and there's some really gorgeous mini roses. Some of those are listed in the favorite roses of the Peninsula Rose Society on our website.
After mine bloomed, all the leaves got yellow and dropped off. Is that what's supposed to happen?
No, at this time of year, you might see that, but they don't usually go completely deciduous. Might have gotten overwatered, or if they didn't shrivel, it's probably not underwatering. It's hard to tell.
Thank you.
I have a question. I also have those like little roses from Trader Joe's, and I keep dealing with like the white powdery mold. I live in San Francisco, and it's inside. What do you recommend to treat that?
Well, the powdery mildew is probably what you're talking about. When you say powdery mold, is it on the
sorry.
Is it on the leaf?
The leaves.
Yeah. That's powdery mildew. And you see Davis has done some R&D on that. And one thing that's used outside and is fairly related to a innocuous compound. I was a chemical engineer once, so the compound is baking soda. And you can actually clean the leaves off with baking soda and a tiny drop of dish detergent, and that was actually researched. A relative of that is actually available in the nursery called bicarb old-fashioned fungicide, and it's organic, listed for use, and it's potassium bicarbonate, a relative. And potassium is actually a nutrient, where sodium is not a nutrient that the plants like. So I've never tried using it inside. I don't know if it's good. You could certainly try baking soda. You probably have that in your cupboard.
Thank you.
My mini rose gets little spider webs on it. Does it have a mite or something?
Yeah, it's a spider mite. They are an arachnid, not an insect, but they suck out the juices, and eventually it causes yellowing of the leaves and they drop off, usually near the bottom of the rose if it's outside, and usually during hot weather. A water spray outside is great. If you have it in a pot inside, the thing to do is take the pot outside, if it's not enormous, and give it a blast of water, making sure you get underneath the leaves. For aphids and for spider mites, that's a great way to take care of it completely non-toxic. And there actually are specialty devices that make that easier when it's outside, like the long-handled 3-foot crook neck sprayer, so that you can get up underneath the leaves. And then I use a spray head that's called a Foggit, Foggit nozzle at 2 GPM. It is a local company that makes a great sprayer, and all it is water. So you use that for aphids. The aphids are dumb, they fall off. They can't figure their way back, and after 2 or so sprayings, they're gone.
Thank you. Your presentation has been so excellent. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. If there are any questions, I know we're about out of time here. The information that should be sent out has my email on it. It's very secret. It's studalton@gmail.com. No one would guess it's me. And there's also contact information for both the Peninsula Rose Society and the Master Gardeners on there. Other general gardening questions, Master Gardeners are probably the best. For especially rose questions, you can ask the Peninsula Rose Society, but if you ask the Master Gardeners a rose question in our area anyway, it probably comes to me. I think we're, according to the clock I see, we're
Yep.
about out of time for the presentation.
Thank you so much, Stuart. This has been so enlightening.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Suzanne, for coordinating all this.
Right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank
See you
you.
later, everyone. Bye.
Bye, thank you.